cleanup. My initial reaction was excitement to begin with. I was very excited to just jump right in, and I didn't really have a moment to check out how many items were really there. So it was a huge endeavor, but it was absolutely exciting to get to be in there. And when I first started, I was with Martha, a volunteer, also a college student. As we went through the attic, I noticed patterns of similar items, and I decided to separate those categories into 5 different categories so I could organize the items according to those, which consisted of medical, photography, literary, furniture, and miscellaneous. Once Martha and I fully cleaned up the attic, we found some critters as well that had met their unfortunate fate. So this is the after the cleanup. So as you can see, there's photography, medical, literary, miscellaneous, our little squirrel friend that we had the privilege of meeting, and then the furniture in the back corner, the trash pile, my work table, and the second room, which we will get more into later. So my job was to create a plan of attack and really sort through all of the items, creating a catalog and conducting conditions analysis on all of them, and then also cleaning. So when handling these artifacts, I used nitrile gloves and dry brushed for all of the dirt and debris that was on the artifacts from sitting in the attic for decades. The catalog spreadsheet is in Microsoft Excel, and I researched the items' dates, origins, and materials to gain a better understanding of what they were used for. From basic Google images for comparative analysis to even exploring information on auction sites such as eBay or the Vatican were useful in artifact identification. In archaeology, items are classified as material culture. This wording is indicative of how we view artifacts as windows into the past to reflect and understand culture, lifeways, uses, beliefs, etc., about a group of people or an individual. Looking at this project through my archaeological lens of seeing objects was extremely useful in getting into the headspace of Frank, Alice, and Isabel. Some of my goals were to learn how to successfully manage a project, which I had not done before, conduct conditions analysis on a wide array of mediums, learn more techniques about cleaning, so dry brushing, and then also using vinegar on some delicate artifacts so it's not a heavy alcohol. Complete training in Past Perfect 5, which is a universal museum archival system that many museums around the world use, and also creating a digital catalog for that system as well. So this is a little image of my progress. I know it's kind of hard to see, but those are 2 snapshots of the actual Microsoft Excel program. These objects are listed under medical, photography, coins. Coins is yellow, medical is red. Pink is medical photography or photomicrography, which I'll get into later a little bit, and then photography in purple. There are 259 objects consisting of 175 plus medical artifacts, 32 coin artifacts, and 52 photographic materials. So these are some coins from the travels of Isabel. Isabel was the oldest daughter of Frank and Eugenie and grew up in the house on Park Row. She attended local public grammar schools and Brunswick High School and then moved on to college at Bryn Mawr. She did graduate work at Bryn Mawr, the University of Pennsylvania, the University of Wisconsin, and also Oxford. She taught European and American history at Hunter College and Brooklyn College from 1929 to 1962. She traveled throughout Europe and authored many books, including several children's books and magazine articles. These coins consisted of many different countries and many different materials, some actual currency, some are just medallions. One of the most significant finds is actually the image on the right, which is a 1652 USA 20 pence replica coin of a pine tree shilling. This type of coin was the original coins used in the Massachusetts Bay Colony following the fall of the English monarchy. These are Ilford processing plates for magic lanterns for Isabel's historical lessons. So the first image, labeled number 1, is the Bayeux Cathedral. The second is Da Vinci's The Last Supper. 3 is Perugino's Christ Giving Keys to St. Peter. And 4, Perugino's Crucifixion and Michelangelo's Self-Portrait. These were probably among my favorite finds because I am an art history major. So studying all of these paintings and then unboxing these miniature little paintings or etchings of these were absolutely wonderful, and it was a great surprise. So these are some of the medical equipment from Frank and Alice's careers as doctors. Frank grew up in Farmington, Maine, and he graduated from Bowdoin College and continued his studies at Bowdoin's Medical School, where he earned his degree there in 1889. He was the first scientist to determine that firing pins of rifles and pistols have unique markings which get transferred to the shells, which are fired by the weapons. Frank was called upon to give expert testimony relating to ballistic evidence at several murder trials. Frank was also the Cumberland County Health Commissioner and Brunswick's milk examiner. Except for a small room which contains many of Frank's medical school records, there is little trace of him in the house at Park Row, and the presence of his equipment in the south attic is very special. Alice, his daughter, was the second daughter of Frank and Eugenie, and she also grew up in the Park Row house. After graduation from Bryn Mawr in 1921, Alice followed her father's footsteps and pursued a career in medicine. She graduated from Yale Medical School and completed an internship and advanced studies at several institutions throughout the country. She eventually settled in Portland, Maine, where she practiced medicine and became Maine's first woman pediatrician from 1930 until 1977. Alice, as well as Isabel, moved beyond the average career paths of her contemporaries. Alice was the last surviving family member, and neither she or Isabel ever married. The house began being the regular family home in 1925, and they stopped using the house in 1925, so it only became a summer home. On the left is a blood pressure machine that is able to fold and travel, as Alice traveled many to her clients' homes many times. The middle is a Silvertone solid brand bacteriological case containing materials like glass slides and stains to view different types of bacteria. It was made early 1900s from Berlin, Germany, and contains many chemicals that are not great to touch or get on your hands, which I learned while processing it. The right figure is some of my favorite medical equipment that I have found. The larger unit is a medical anesthesia chloroform mask that was used 1850 to 1900, where they would place that mask over your face, drip cloth over it, and drip chloroform onto the cloth, and that was used as anesthesia because of the low odor and just ease of use. There are also several surgical scissors, and there's a curved mosquito forceps to clamp arteries that was used in surgery, and a Tycho's sphygmomanometer. That was a really hard one to say. Sorry if I butchered it. This slide has some of the more unique finds that I found that are not necessarily my personal favorites in processing, but just their background is fascinating. On the right is a True Bite teeth box, a mahogany box from the Dentist Supply Company of New York. It contains a color wheel of teeth, information pamphlet, tools, and teeth to choose from for 2 central incisors, 2 lateral incisors, and 2 canine teeth. This is one of the most unusual finds, like I said, because little information is known of its provenance. The bottom left is a solid brass Bausch & Lomb optical company microscope. About 1920s, it was extremely difficult to find a comparative analysis for this image, as many of them have transferred over the years, and it is still a working company to this day. This microscope was a little hard to conserve, and clean because some of the parts that make it turn from horizontal position to vertical are rusted. So trying to clean it in an awkward position was challenging, but it came out pretty nice. And the bottom right is Alice's diploma from Yale, which is a great achievement, and it's sitting right next to me. As previously mentioned, photomicrography is the act of taking pictures of microscope slides. We have several in our archive of the South Attic so far, and they were previously used in an exhibit for the PHC, I think maybe in the 90s. The left has a lamp, some dry plates, sensitized paper, and developer and a heating element and projector. And then the right is the camera, which is in a vertical position. It's the opposite of the microscope. It should be horizontal. The microscope should be vertical. But this was a really cool find, and we kind of took it apart, not fully, but to see the inner workings of it, and it's very heavy to lift. So for current work, we are rearranging the space to accommodate for the furniture to be cataloged. And volunteers are going through the literary items such as documents, books, pamphlets, magazines, etc., to catalog them. And I created these little sheets to help me out. So volunteers will come in and sit at the desk and process these items, and they'll count for some hours, and then they'll tell me all about it. And it's really exciting to hear how much fun they're having doing it. For future goals, we're finishing cataloging furniture and literary, and then we're moving on to the second room in the South Attic where some type of processing has occurred. However, we need to go back in, reassess it, and complete it like the first room. And I just want to thank Larissa and Amy for this wonderful experience. It has been so rewarding and so challenging at the same time to organize all of this and manage volunteers and guide people throughout it. So it's been really fun. There's some information below about our opening hours on May 29th, and some images, and the house tours will be starting back up soon. However, the South Attic is not on the tour itinerary. However, if you ever want some images, you're always welcome to ask. Since I finished early, this is some of the attic where I cleaned all of this out with some volunteers.
Morgan, you'll have to stop sharing your screen.
Oh, right.
Yeah, we can't see.
Okay. Can you see me now?
Let's see. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the space where everything was, and it's all cleaned out so that furniture and miscellaneous can all be lined up. And then over here is the majority of the stuff, where this is all miscellaneous and personal items, and medical, photography, and paintings are over here. So yeah, I think that's it. And I think we're ready for questions.
So I would welcome anybody to put a question in the chat box, or it's very difficult for me to see everybody at once here, to see hands. Okay, I see a couple questions. I see 3 questions coming in. So let's see. Morgan, can somebody access the spreadsheets from the computers outside of PHC?
So as of right now, I'm not able to, considering I'm still working on them. However, once I'm done, we can always share it through a newsletter, or a virtual newsletter, and email it to people if they'd like to see it.
And there's a question about wanting to know more. Actually, 3 people basically asking about the second room. So we'd like a little bit of a walk through into the second room, or see the second room, and actually if you can tell people more about it and what has been done in that room so far.
Yeah. So this is it. It's a little bit smaller, but as you can see, there's an animal trap and a bunch of boxes. This is kind of what the attic looked like, only in a larger scope. And back here, there are a bunch of boxes full of items that have already been processed, meaning they've been sorted and categorized, not necessarily to the extent that we're doing in the first room, but there is some level of organization that we'll have to reassess and challenge and take that on a little bit later. I hope that helps. I have not touched the second room yet, so I don't know exactly what items are in there as of right now.
There was some cleanup that was done by another volunteer though, because it was a bit of a mess in there on the floor. We did in the past have some critters in the attic. No surprise, 19th century buildings, but that has been taken care of. We've had the hole that was there closed up. So let's see. So we have a question: how much material is still cataloged? I think that maybe means how much is left to be cataloged. How much more needs to be cataloged?
You know, I wish I had a definitive number, but there are about 30 boxes full of documents, financial papers, travel pamphlets, books, poems, all this literary stuff right over to the left of me. And then there are, I think, about 7 trunks full of personal items like napkins, kitchenwares. I know there's 2 croquet sets, and a bunch of plates over here, along with baskets and furniture like chairs, rocking chairs. There's a few maps. Um, that's a shortened list, but it was still long.
We have a question about items from other family members. Have you found any letters, papers, or documents from Martha or Alfred? So that would be the first generation, especially from the period 1867 to 1885.
Yep. So we have not found any documents of from Martha or Alfred. However, there are some mentions of them, I believe, in other papers. I have not been going through the papers as that is part of the volunteers' jobs, but I'm sure we'll find some type of material here or evidence that they had something to do with the attic.
This question is about children, which is really interesting. My favorite finds from my own attic are ones that speak toward the long history of children in our house. Have you found any evidence of the attic as playground?
That's a really good question. We have not found any evidence that it was specifically used by the children. However, there are mementos to Isabel and Alice that we have found. There's been, let's see, I don't know the actual name of it, but they're little paper houses, kind of like Lincoln logs, but in a paper 2D form that you can build up that we've found. And there's some baby material. So there's been blankets, some clothing, socks, and there are graduation caps and gowns here, which we have found. And I think they're from Brunswick High School.
Excellent. What about the parrot? Is that in there or is that over here?
I think Amy brought it downstairs to do a social media post, unless she brought it. But
That may be actually in the office behind me. I'm going to give you another question to answer, and I'm going to go see and grab it because that's pretty fun.
okay.
What prompted PHC to engage in this work now? And do you have other spaces like this to tackle in the future? I think I will let you, and maybe Amy could chime in with an answer on that, but go ahead, Morgan.
Yeah. I think, so part of putting history to work, PHC gave 3 options for projects to tackle. One of them was the attic here to do exactly what I've been doing. The other was the basement of PHC, I believe it was not the Skolfield-Whittier House, and tackle all of those items down there. And Amy and I discussed that this is a really fun project and something that needed to get done. So my skills could be best used up here. But Amy, please chime in.
Yeah, absolutely. When you told us what your skill set was, I definitely wanted to give you a choice. But you seemed like the type of person who would be comfortable not only designing a project, but managing the project. And since this was a project that no one had touched yet, it seemed like a perfect opportunity. And I'd just like to say that we all chose right, because you've done a fantastic job. And this is an ongoing project. And one of the things that I know Morgan has worked very hard to do is to make the work that she has done accessible, so that when she leaves, someone else can pick right up and either continue along where she's at, or pass the work off to the next person to do the next step. The spreadsheet that she's been working on has the information categories taken directly from Past Perfect, so that they can be cut and pasted to a certain degree. So that was one of the really good benefits of the way that she's tackling this. And I'll also say that the next question kind of relates to this, and asks what the plan for accessioning the items into the PHC collections is. So that is the plan. I think what we need to do first, because the Skolfield-Whittier House collection is not in our Past Perfect database, it's only cataloged by paper cards, that we'll find a way to add this record to that record, and then they can all be accessioned into the collections around the same time. And that will be another project.
I can always share my screen so people can actually see the catalog that I'm working on, if people would like to see that. That way they can kind of get a sense of what kind of information that I'm gathering from these objects. Let me see.
Go for it, Morgan. Yep.
Share. Here we go. All right, so this is the master catalog. So we have the category table, which is the coins, medical, the 5 categories. The collection is the Skolfield-Whittier House. The object name is the number that will be part of the accession into Past Perfect. The object name, so coins, medical, that's where I identify the actual object. The inventory date, so I started in February 1st, I guess, right here. But I think end of January. And then the box number, location, South Attic. The box number is very important, because once we transfer it to the box, it is in that final resting place right now. And to be able to go and find it, I needed to label all the boxes. The description is any details that are inscribed on that, and any identifying features, so color, shape, size, and the conditions assessment. And then any comments, so believed to be a replica, or perhaps part of Alice's office. So this is part of the coins. And medical is all of this beefy Excel. And photography. So that's what I'm doing right now. So eventually that will be accessible in some type of medium.
It's really incredible work, and I think it's important to have it in this format before we do attempt to put everything in Past Perfect, which is its own massive project. We have used as a temporary measure a lot of bankers boxes, just because as she's been organizing the materials, we didn't want to go immediately to expensive storage, acid-free archival storage boxes, but we will be doing that. Everything will be eventually transferred to those. And just one quick note about accessioning. If you want to get very technical about it, everything in there is already accessioned because the house is our largest collection item, and everything in the house is technically in the collection. But we will definitely be examining all of the items for retaining in the collection as we begin working on transferring them into the formal database. It's very possible that some items could be deaccessioned if they're not deemed historically important to the family's story. But right now, nothing is, we're not looking at any of the items that way. We're assuming they're all part of the collection because they are. Okay, we've got a couple more things in here. What are your most historically important finds? What would you say that based on the research you've done about the items?
There's been a few. So we actually found a murder weapon that was used in an actual murder where Frank did his pathology and blood work on. So I think that one is interesting. I don't know how historically important it is, but that was one that I did not mention before. Historically important. I think photomicrography is really important because that field, although it's relatively newer, I should say, its evolution is much more drastic, so we went from that big clunky camera to cameras that are minuscule, literally in microscopes. So I think that is really fun to see the evolution of that whole field.
Kind of neat when you think about the pandemic and making vaccines and all the microscopic work scientists are doing. They're not using giant clunky things like that, but it's the same same idea, looking at things under a microscope. So that's kind of a neat connection.
We did find a Texas guide to diseases, I believe it was, and I think it's in that other room right now. But looking through that, I was like, wow, people are going to want to see this because of COVID.
I don't know about that. I'll have to look at that. Yeah. So, somebody asked, were there any items found deemed unsalvageable and tossed?
Yes, there was a lot of damage up here, whether it was from insects or even rodents like our squirrel friends. They completely shredded documents that we will never get to see, so those mentions of Martha or Alfred could have been on those, and we might not know if they were here or not because of the damages that have been done. I know for a lot of metal, it is not climate controlled in here, so there is a lot of moisture, and especially during the summers, and that affects how the preservation of things are. Documents sticking to one another has been an issue. Rubber bands leaving their elastic residue on those items has been pretty tragic for some of them. But yeah, there's been a few. As our trash pile increasingly got larger and larger, it became more clear how important preservation and conservation of those items are. And though the majority of the pile was cardboard from those boxes that they were previously in, there were a lot of tissue, paper that was thrown out as well, which is not that important, but it also indicated the level of importance that Alice and Isabel took to preserve their items and preserve memories of their life, which is really nice because it made me, and I'm sure a whole lot of other people working up here, want to handle those items extra carefully, because that next step of them putting their lives together in these boxes and then us coming up here when they've passed on, it's respectful to just handle those the way that they would have. So I think that was one of the most important and humbling experiences here.
That's really well said. Somebody's asked if there's an estimate for how much this collection is worth monetarily. And, in our historical society, collecting world, we don't, unless we need to for various reasons, we do not, appraise or put value on a lot of the items, because a lot of things are valuable only insofar as kind of what you've just talked about, Morgan. They were important to a person in the past. Some of the coins might be able to be valued by looking them up, some of the equipment and so forth, but a lot of other things are valuable for their sentimental value or their memories, or their historical value to the narrative of this family and to us telling the story of this family. What would you like to say about that?
Yeah, so the majority of the monetary value primarily rests in the medical equipment because it is considered antique medical equipment. And even researching on eBay and the Vatican, some of these materials were extremely hard to find. And I took hours to research some of them to find their background or estimate what their condition would be considered to what it was before. I know the pine tree shilling is the most valuable. If it was real, if it was authentic, it would have been the most valuable, um, to my knowledge as of right now. Close second would probably be the cameras or the microscope. There's several microscopes actually. I think there's 2 or 3. So I think the added value of those would put medical category skyrocketing up to the most valuable.
What would be your dream find? What would you love to find up there?
Ooh, that is a tough one. I didn't even consider that, honestly. Um, Probably trace evidence of the presence of people of color here, because I, in the attic itself, I have not seen it, but there are indications in the other side of the house that there might be servants' quarters here or there. And so I think it would be really cool to find trace evidence of people of color being here and leaving their mark on this house and the family itself.
That's a pretty cool answer. I'll also take this opportunity to show the parrot that I was referring to earlier. And perhaps you or Amy, because Amy, I know one of you wrote the social media post, could say a little bit about this. We don't really know for sure what it was doing in there, but.
I can take this one because I did the research on it. We kind of saw it, and it might be at first dismissed because it's just kind of looks like a modern toy, really. But looking at the tag on it, it said, I think Mary Light is the company, or Mary Thought, and it is made in England, and it's listed as a hygienic toy. And when I did a little bit of research, I found out that Mary Light or Mary Thought was quite an old company in Britain that manufactured toys. And that one of the most interesting things that I found out is that their primary designer, their principal designer for a long number of years was a woman named Florence. I can't remember what her last name is at the moment, but she was both deaf and mute, and her toy designs are still or were still in production quite late. I think some of them might still be in production. And we thought maybe since it was made in England, it was something that Isabel picked up on one of her travels. And since it was a children's toy, perhaps it had been, yes, Mary thought. Perhaps it had been a gift for Isabel to put in her office for one of her children patients, perhaps.
Alice.
It's the, yes, Alice, sorry. And I've just decided, I think that's the South Attic mascot.
Look at our squirrels though.
That looks like we've come to the end of the questions, and I just want to thank you, Morgan, for all this incredible work. Amy and I are continually amazed at the volume of work that Morgan is able to do in her in her life. The school work, the internships. I believe she has another internship that she's secured as well that you might say a little bit about. And we do hope she's going to continue doing some volunteering here with us.
Yeah, so this semester I actually had 3 internships. So the Ocean Map Library, the PHC here, and then I was also continuing an archaeology internship with Nathan Hamilton, where I did the McClellan House and the Rebecca Nurse House excavations and artifact processing. Those 3 internships were probably the best experiences out of my undergraduate career, and they've opened so many doors for me. So I'm so thankful for Libby, Louie, Larissa, Amy, and Nathan Hamilton. Long laundry list. And this summer I will be continuing volunteering here and spending time with my South Attic buddies, and also volunteering or interning at the Brickstore Museum in Kennebunkport, dealing with their archives and textiles and other materials and education outreach as well. So I'm excited for that.
I expect to see Morgan's name at the top of the heap at an organization someday as director or what have you. She's a go-getter for sure. And you've got some lovely comments in the chat box congratulating you for your work and for this program. Before we go, I want to just mention that Amy put in the chat box a link to our volunteer submission form. We love volunteers. We've got a great new crew of folks that are starting with us this spring as collections volunteers, office volunteers, buildings and grounds, and docents in our 2 house museums, the other one being the Joshua Chamberlain Museum. If you are interested in volunteering with us, you can drop in and do a standalone project, or you can come in every week or every other week. We welcome volunteers. We love volunteers. And Morgan will be glad to put you to work up there in the South Attic. As you heard, we have collections that are in less than perfect, ideal environments, and that's an ongoing task for an organization like ours that's been around since 1888 and has 100,000 plus collection items. We are working on a master plan for the organization, and which involves a new collection storage facility down the road, which you'll hear more about in the months to come. But it's for reasons like this that we need to really think about how to store all of our collections in better climate controlled environments. And we really thank Morgan for bringing to light all of the great finds in there, and so that we can take care of them properly for years to come. So thank you so much, Morgan. We really have enjoyed this very much, and thank you all for joining us today. We hope to see you for our next program on June 10th.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Goodbye. Have a good afternoon and weekend.